Greetings, welcome back. We are going to wrap up chapter 4 today. Mostly the topic of the day is poverty. Poverty worldwide? Yeah, poverty in America, much more specifically, because that's where we live and that's where we're going to practice probably all of the skills that we're picking up here. And at the end, we'll have some stuff to say about daycares. Not that much. Usually I'd have people spend a day on this and design their own daycares in groups. Obviously, we're not doing groups. So I'm gonna, largely what we're skipping is the differences in types of daycares, which you're really only interested in if you plan on working in or running a daycare, probably. And there's not that much material on it. So glance at it, kind of see the names of the different kinds, and that's probably good enough. All right, so poverty in America, about half of kids are poor. The poverty line is pretty absurd for a family of four. It's like 20 grand a year for four people, which forget it. That's well before being actually poor. That's like to qualify for benefits. About half of kids make less than live in households making less than twice the poverty guidelines, which is still well short of being middle class. Some stuff that happens when you're poor. Elevated cortisol levels result from stress. Stress results from living with stressed out people, from being in noisy environments, from not knowing where your next paycheck is coming from, to conflict with bosses because you need the job, you don't have FU money, you can't just walk off a job and stuff, and so on and so on and so on. So mothers and young children consistently, when impoverished, have higher than average cortisol levels. And the long-term effect of cortisol in the brain is to cause brain shrinkage. It's bad for you. Now, if you have high cortisol levels, and cortisol is toxic to the brains over the long term, consider the effect on brains that are growing. They're immature, and up until about age 8, you're still doing neurogenesis, and after 5, pruning kind of at the same time. And just imagine trying to do that work in this sort of toxic shrinkage environment. I'm going to deviate here from the material to sort of present all at once, kind of almost all the effects of poverty on lifespan development, but always bringing it back to childhood. So poverty affects your education. This is a school for poor people. You are well aware of the fact that you probably didn't get the best of educations in the United States because of where and how you lived. So education, poverty really affects which school you attend, doesn't it? Because you live in neighborhoods and schools are funded primarily by property taxes. So if you live in a neighborhood full of apartments where nobody pays property taxes, those schools are just running on the bare bones federal and state funds that come in, and all the extra money for facilities and gear and equipment and teacher trainings and paying the best people to hold those positions, it just isn't there. And race absolutely matters here. It's almost impossible in America to talk about poverty without talking about race, and to talk race without talking poverty. The two are so intertwined. We have de facto neighborhood segregation. De facto means it's not the law of the land, right? We did away with segregation in the 1960s, legally speaking. But redlining districts and property owners in New York City who buying an apartment block will bribe all of the black people to move out so they can charge the new tenants more rent. Having a black family in an apartment building in New York City lowers the average rent that people are willing to pay, and just so many ways and means of reasons for segregating everything. Our neighborhoods are more segregated now than they were prior to the end of segregation, on average. Well, what does that mean? That means when poverty accrues to skin color and you put all the people of one race in one neighborhood, it's a poor neighborhood. Black and brown neighborhoods are on average poorer than white neighborhoods, which means black and brown people on average go to poorer schools. Okay? It's going to reduce parental investment because parents have to work. They have to work longer, harder hours. They're, you're much more likely to be a latchkey kid if you're poor, and the quality of parenting might decline because parents might be uneducated and lack the energy, right, to be good, patient, loving, kind parents. Travel times are going to matter. Getting to and from school is going to be a big problem. Oh, I meant to say here, parents just might not have the skills to help you with your schooling. They're poor and uneducated, go hand in glove. And so even for me, education is getting out of control, man. It's going faster and faster. So my kid is 15 and he's doing calculus already. I can't help him with calculus work. But wealthier parents can hire tutors. They can come to all the school meetings and be involved and join the school board and know the teachers and stuff. And the poorer you are, the less you can do that, and the less you're in a position to even have any help. Busing, waiting maybe half an hour for a 1 hour bus ride to and from. Rural poverty really, really picks this one out. There's one school in the county and everyone goes there, and the bus takes 2 hours to get up. You might have these poverty-related interferences where school isn't really safe because you're there with a bunch of people who don't really have parents on the scene forming secure attachments and teaching how to be civilized members of society, like that. So the poorer the school, the more we're just doing behavior intervention instead of conveying information. Drugs and gangs, again, hand in hand with poverty. Okay, so some kinds of drugs are really popular in wealthier white neighborhoods. Prescription drug epidemic and kids stealing their mommy's OxyContin and stuff absolutely happens. Different kinds, different classes. The need to work. Not just the parents. Sometimes you need to go to work at 14 or 15 and you're lying on your paperwork so you can pull shifts at the McDonald's to contribute to the family income because that's where your family income is. My kid would work if it wasn't COVID out there, and he has the luxury of avoiding COVID, right? So do I. Like that. The need to work, not just the parents work keeping them out of the picture, not able to help with the schooling and so on, but kids need to work. Can really hamper educational opportunities all the way through your lifespan. The number one reason for dropping out of college? It's not poverty per se, it's the need to work. Right, because your work doesn't agree that your education's important. You're going to educate your way out of the billet that you currently occupy, aren't you? They don't want that to happen. They rely on uneducated, quote unquote, low skill labor to make those corporate profits. They can pay you nothing so that the shareholders can profit. Your education is not in that realm of priority. So the need to work, you don't have time to do the homework and write all the papers and do all the research, and they keep scheduling you for shifts on class days, and you keep having arguments about it. Essentially that exhaustion is what causes people to drop out of school. The environment itself. NIMBY stands for not in my backyard. Okay. Wealthy white neighborhoods, they control the government. They are, people work in the government and they know lawyers and launch civil suits and stuff. So when you want to build the new dog food plant and it's going to be rendering meat. God, you ever been near a rendering plant? It stinks. Where are you going to put it? Right. Where are you going to put the smokestacks and the coal, whatever we do with coal and so on? Are they going in the rich white neighborhoods? No, they are not. The steel mills and well, you want to situate that stuff where you can get people to do the work. You're looking for poor people willing to work for almost nothing, so that's where you go. But then when there are environmental effects of this kind of heavy industry, people in these neighborhoods have neither the inclination nor the means to take any kind of legal action to prevent the thing moving in the first place, or to do any kind of cleanup and restitution when it starts killing people. Building standards. The poorer you are, the more likely you are to live in older places, right? So this is the Flint, Michigan problem where the water infrastructure is old, if you know, lead pipe old. And so the lead pipes, the linings of the lead pipes are starting to corrode, and the lead's getting into the water and causing neurological damage and just a whole host of issues. And no one has the money or the will to go in there and put that to right. There might be lead paint on your walls, might be asbestos and the insulation, you know, all kinds of stuff that goes with older buildings that wealthier people just don't have to deal with. It might be like a local environment kind of thing, like the home environment. Um, if you have money, then you have toys. You can buy educational and enriching, engaging things that light up and flash and move, right? To keep baby's mind um, processing, making a whole bunch of neural networks to which information can be attached later on. In the impoverished environment, you know, there are no toys. Maybe there's the TV blaring, but you know, dirty, bare walls and nothing, and no one to interact with. What kind of neural development do you expect to see? So we have rat experiments. We're not going to cut open babies' brains and count dendrites and stuff, but we are fine doing that with rats. And so rats with nice, engaging environments and things to play with, social relationships, form nice, normal, healthy brains full of synapses, basically. Remember what those are from the previous chapter. Um, Rats kept in impoverishment, they're alone, and there's nothing to do except sleep and drink water and eat the same boring pellets every day. They do not. They form radically fewer synapses, and their brains are smaller. And then later they're ineducable because you do that developmental pruning. You can't teach stuff later. Remember that. And like the takeaway from the rat experiment is that we combine the two rat populations at one point. So we have rats in a cage, and the cage has like sexually receptive mates and novel food every day and a wheel to run on and right lots of fun and so forth. But then there are rats who live in an outer shell, separated, not able to interact, but able to watch all of that going on. And their brains develop exactly like the impoverished brains. They don't get the benefits of that enrichment because it's not happening to them. They're just observing it happen. Noise in the environment. You know, you live in an off-street apartment in the city, and down below there's the traffic going back and forth, and the sirens and the jet planes maybe and stuff like that. Really hard to sleep, concentrate. Noise pollution is a serious problem with healthy development. It affects health all the way through the lifespan. Poor quality food leads to developmental stunting, right? So we've had this talk before. Look, kids are bigger and bigger and bigger every year, aren't they? Go to the rich neighborhoods in town. I'm a little over 6'1", and if I'm in the wealthier neighborhoods, I don't belong there, but I go, and like the teenage girls, the 17 to 20 sort of set, are as tall as me, right? Because they're eating high quality food. Not really heard of in my generation, but high quality food. Poor quality food gets you the opposite, developmental stunting. The sort of racist colonial explorers arriving in Africa in the 17 and 1800s, despite bands of people they refer to as pygmies. They're about half as tall as the Western explorers, who at the time are substantially smaller than I am now already, right? And they think they've discovered they don't know about genetics, but they're describing like a race or a species or something of people who are just like born to be small. And that's crap. There are no pygmies left because people eat and they eat food and all of that. The opposite, right? Developmental stunting. And your brain consumes like a quarter of all the calories you burn in the course of a day. Imagine the effects of malnutrition on intelligence, study, all the stuff that we need to get through school and get our degrees and have our lovely careers in whatever we're doing. Diabetes, a much higher rate among poor than wealthy people because of food quality. We'll revisit this bit a little later, but body mass and diabetes go hand in glove. We're eating trash, high fructose corn syrup, and that might not be the individual fault of the individual person doing the grocery shopping. That's just a teaser. I'll give you the whole scoop on that a little later in the course. And again, body mass correlates with race because race correlates with poverty. So we visit states in the Deep South, and there's a distinct, significant difference in both the body mass index rates and the diabetes rates between Black and white residents of southern states. Black people tend to be heavier and to have a higher incidence of diabetes. And we go, is this a race marker? No, there are no race markers. Race is not a meaningful biological quality. This is a sociologic quality. And is it about culture? Do Black people just like such and such kinds of food? No. Black people are poorer on average than white people and therefore eat worse quality food and experience these health outcomes. So there's that. And again, the opposite is true. Visiting relatives in California a few years ago, we did like a tourist thing and went to La Jolla in California. I'm probably saying that wrong. I don't care. And that's where the coastal housing is, and the $1 million, 2 bedrooms block off the beach and stuff like that. And people there are skinny. People there are skinny. In this country, poor people are fat. In like every other country in the world, rich people are fat. So I know you can't see me, but I am among the chunkiest of monkeys, especially with like the COVID isolation, not getting the exercise I used to have. I'm at home most of the time next to the kitchen, you know what I mean? You know what I mean, right? So I've kind of regained the freshman 15, yeah, like that. More like the freshman 150, honestly. So when I'm in other countries, I'm in China doing conferences, existential psychology conferences, whatever. People see that belly and they make assumptions about me that are undue, right? Everyone wants to touch it because, like touching Buddha's belly at the temple, because you're hoping some luck will rub off if you do that. It represents opportunity and good fortune and prosperity. We know, because we're Americans, we know being fat represents being impoverished and eating trash. Hasn't really caught up. It takes a certain amount of excess resources to get fat, and still in most places in the world. Healthcare. We have for-profit medicine in this country. Absolute statement. I'll make very few of these, but here is a definitive truth. Profit motives always corrupt 100% of the time care motives. For-profit medicine is an oxymoron. Period. Doesn't work. We have the best healthcare in the world for rich people, and the rest of us go spit. For-profit care avoids poor neighborhoods. Why wouldn't it? If the motivation is to make money, then why would you put hospitals and urgent cares and general practices in places where people can't pay you and don't have health insurance? You would not. So there are places in America, it's not entirely a rural problem, but really, really clear in poor rural areas. It might be miles to the nearest hospital and further than that to the nearest family practice. Because money. People die of gunshot wounds in Chicago that they don't have to die from, because the hospital nearest the South Side, where shootings mostly happen, for years and years now, has been on divert. They're tired of getting people in to the emergency room who need expensive, bullet extraction and surgery and so on, who default on the payments. They don't have money and they can't pay. So they've been on divert, and you have to drive past that hospital like another 18 miles north or something to the next hospital. And people just die in the ambulance for money. Preventive care, stuff like regular checkups, forget about it. Exercise and fitness and nutrition, forget it. Dentistry, no. What are you even talking about? Neighborhood safety affects your health. If it's a nice night and the COVID's not too high, I like to go out in the evening and walk a couple miles and hopefully see bats, sometimes an owl or something. It's nice. Go out in the morning, and it's one of the reasons I'm so heavy right now is I just don't like to be outside and see other human beings during these kind of COVID times. See the people with their faces uncovered everywhere, acting like nothing's happening and everything's normal. No consideration for others. I just get really mad, and I prefer not to. But I could. There's sidewalks in my neighborhood and a park and all that stuff. Whereas if you're poor, you probably live in some like dense urban place where there aren't sidewalks. And it's not safe to walk around by yourself just for no reason. It's dirty and smoggy and noisy, and even if there was a sidewalk, it would be in no way enjoyable. And then like rural poverty has this advantage. There's always some place you can just go and walk and hike and sit by a river and fish. All right. What about work? I didn't even put in more danger. Who does the dangerous occupations? People who can't afford to buy out of the dangerous occupations. Police officers policing is the 14th most dangerous profession in the US, and like crab fishing is always in the top couple. There was a surprise in there this year. I forget what it was, something like beef farming. So really weird thing shows up. Electrical line people, the folks who climb the poles and fix the electric and so on, really, really dangerous. We go around thanking soldiers for their service like all the time. You're really just telling me you're a Republican when you do that. I don't want to be thanked for my service by people who don't understand it. It's gross, honestly. It's gross. Stop it. But like raising up every military member as a hero is probably misguided. If you've been in the military, plenty of people who aren't heroes, right? Yeah. The folks I served with, I wouldn't trust to mop the floors at the 7-Eleven, okay? Um, People don't sign up for the military primarily to serve their country. People don't sign up out of some like go-getter, patriotic, family history of service, and I regret that I have but one life to give for my country and all that kind of stuff. People sign up to escape poverty. All right? That's not heroism. That's doing what you have to do. Okay? It's also not worthy of contempt. You can buy out. Poor people serve in the military. Rich people, by and large, do not. Poor people tend to work more hours for less money. Just compute that in your head. People who are poor work more hours for less money, right? Part-time jobs with no benefits. If the government says at 36 hours you have to give your employees health care, then McDonald's and whatever go, all right, 35 and 3/4 hours for you, right? The hardest working person in America is that like single mother of two who gets up at 5 and rides a train for an hour into the suburbs to serve white people shitty food at Applebee's, and then takes another train to another chain restaurant because she can't get full-time hours at the first one and works another 6-hour shift there, and gets home at 10 or 11 at night just to make enough money so her family doesn't starve to death. That's the hardest. Okay. I just need you to understand this. Poor people have jobs. Poor people have jobs. They're not moochers. I know, Derek, you have an example. All right. The person exploiting benefits to, scam the system and stuff. Think about this though. If there isn't a job out there that's better than standing in line for Social Security and food stamps and what you can get off of that, that's an economic problem, isn't it? And the problem isn't that the benefits pay too much, because people working 2 and 3 and 5 jobs aren't making ends meet. Poor people have jobs, lots of them, and they're crappy jobs. Difficult, dangerous, demeaning, dirty. It's just an accident all those start with D. I didn't do it on purpose. Okay? So when we talk about the dignity of work, just think in your head a little bit about the dignity of working the late shift at the fast food place, getting grease burns on your wrists while people drive through the drive-through all drunk and stuff, being rude to you and yelling at you that you should get a better education if you don't like it. Dignity, right? For kids, work keeps parents away. For older kids, they're at risk of having to go to work instead of focusing on their education and that. But work has this primary effect of keeping parents away. We need parents there. We might get less attachment. Evidence isn't really strongly in favor of that point, but it's a possibility. But certainly less guidance, less care, less nurturance, less safety. Okay. Less access to nutrition, even if food is available, because mom goes out to work those 2 jobs. The latchkey kids have to come home and feed themselves. Maybe they have a couple of bucks to walk through the 7-Eleven, which is the only food in their neighborhood. Maybe there's TV dinners in the refrigerator or something, but almost certainly they're getting worse nutrition than someone who has a parent on site preparing food from ingredients, right? Okay, good. Good, so those are the effects primarily of poverty. Spoiler alert, this might be a question on the final exam. And as an aside here, it's come to our attention as a nation that Black and brown people are vastly overrepresented in the roles of people affected by COVID. both biologically and economically, right? Black and brown people, non-white people in America are bearing the brunt of the COVID epidemic. Now, why might that be? Well, for a host of interacting factors, right? And I've described all the factors. COVID preys in particular on people with pre-existing health conditions. We don't know why at this point. If it's the future, because I plan on using this video forever, maybe this will seem naive, but right now we just don't know why. On July 17th, 2020, no idea, but it does. Diabetes, especially, and asthma are two really important risk factors for COVID-19 putting you in the hospital and for you not coming back out of the hospital. Once you get on that respirator, getting off the respirator is the challenge. The rates of cure for people on recovery for people on respirators low. Well, so you have a disease that preys on people opportunistically with pre-existing health conditions, who has the pre-existing health conditions in this country. What did we just say? Poverty affects your health. For all these reasons, right? Poverty affects your health. And race correlates with poverty. Economically, work. Race correlates with poverty. Poor people are working more hours for less money, right? I don't have much of a cushion because, as we're going to get to in a second, escaping poverty is a generational project, but I have some cushion, and you know, if I have to give up a couple of classes in the next term, it'll hurt, but I'll be okay. But who's living hand to mouth? Who's getting the last couple of dollars together to pay the rent the day the rent is due? Right? Poor people. I'm not saying there are no poor white people. I'm saying your risk of being poor is much higher. Right? It correlates with your skin color. The darker your skin, the more likely it is to happen to you. The more likely you grew up that way and there's really no way out. So that economic catastrophe, it's hitting people in the service fields, right? Travel and hospitality and food service and bars and cab drivers and Uber, which is not a good way to make money, okay? Who does that hit? Who does it hit hardest and first? And then that confluence between the things. Like I get to work at, I'm not at home, but if I wanted, I could record all this stuff from home and I'd have to clear off my hard drive because there's a lot of video. I could do it. And even here, I'm in an office by myself, not talking to anybody except this screen, right? When we're looking at people who can continue to work, therefore continue to have an income from home, well, that's people already in more technical enterprises who are already on average making better money. The poor people get hit because they're in the service industries, right? That service sector is struggling to survive. Now, if you have the chance to stay at work, if you're at the Safeway or at the Subway restaurant or whatever, is that really a restaurant or a sandwich shop? And someone's going to pay you to be there. I mean, you don't really have the ability to say no. Economically, you don't have the ability to say no, and so you go, right? Which means what? More exposure. So we have this confluence now between pre-existing health problems and the need to continue to put yourself in the front line, driving the bus or whatever it is. Why would COVID hurt Black and brown people? Why would people of color in this country be bearing the brunt? For a host of complex interacting reasons, and they're all under this umbrella of poverty. So in this class, if you ever don't know the answer to a question, just say poverty, and there's a pretty good chance you're right. Okay? Okay. Generational project. Typically, it takes education to escape poverty anymore. You could work your way out of poverty theoretically. It would take some luck and a lot of hours. Possibly it could be done. Lottery tickets, buying a ticket does not substantially improve your chance of winning, but also winning the lottery. Most people are bankrupt 5 years after winning the lottery because they have no concept of what the money's for, and they're suddenly target to frivolous lawsuits, and on and on and on and on. Suicide rates really, really high for lottery winners, especially for lottery winners. So education, probably the path most people are seeing out. We don't really have grants anymore. You might be here on a grant, but it doesn't pay for everything, does it? What we're selling people instead is student loans. So I got through on student loans. Like, my people are British factory workers, and they solder widgets to other widgets all day long. You know, solder the thing, put it in a bucket, solder the thing, put it in a bucket. Been doing it for 40 years, the same thing, the same way, you know. And that was what everyone expected. For me, I said no. I went to school. I had a little career here and there. Went back to school. I got a doctorate, very expensive. So I graduated with a doctorate in 2010 with $132,000 in student loans. I know, man. 132,000. Now I've been paying for 10 years. I've been making my payments on time every single month, and now I only owe $178,000. Because the income adjusted payments don't pay the interest, and the interest just adds to the principal. And thank you, student loans. I can literally never repay you. So there's that. Is you can change your lifestyle a little bit, but the additional earnings you get from having that doctorate or that technical education are going to be offset by someone having a piece of your action. The money you had to borrow to get there, you're going to owe that the rest of your life. Jobs have gotten really technical and competitive, and like bypassing professional education. It just needs to get educated. So entering the middle class. Let's say you do like me, and you get a complex technical education and a job that needs an education, and therefore you get compensated for somewhat okay. You have the skills for managing money. I don't. I absolutely have no means for getting in the stock market, and yeah. 1% of people in this country own half the stocks. Yeah. Because they come with a family history of managing stock portfolios and having money in a bank and all that stuff. Are you just covering debts? Because student loans are what they are. Just last year, I finished paying off credit cards from that period when I couldn't work while I was going into college. Do you have poor family members? Like, are you the only one in your family now making a decent salary? And so your brothers and sisters and cousins and mom and stuff are always there needing you? It takes generations to get out of poverty, right? So when people are talking reparations, they're talking about the generational poverty related to slavery, because during the whole period of slavery and Jim Crow, white families were capable of owning land and owning means of production and passing on property through wills and inheritances. And so white people start on average with substantially more advantage in life than particularly Black people, but any person of color on average. And so reparations is about making sure everyone kind of starts with that same level of background wealth And then on that even footing, buying houses and paying property taxes in schools and investing in businesses, having capital to do the right investment and so on and so on. However you feel about it, that's the argument. Is it Ta-Nehisi Coates? One of his books, kind of lays out the whole thing there. So, at the moment, the best we can do is make small gains, which in the end are passed on to our children, right? So I arrived in America with nothing and made my own way from day one. No help with college, no help with anything ever. My kid won't have it that way. So I'll probably die with $0 to my name, $0 to my name. But him, I can help him out with a car. He's 15, 16, he'll start in that place. Housing, somewhere to live, and better chance to start from higher than 0. And then he'll pass down to his kids, maybe a little higher than that, and a little higher than that, and so on. We'll work our way out of generational poverty. Do you have those same opportunities? What can we do? What can we do about all this American poverty? I mean, voting is one thing. Voting rationally in one's own self-interest makes sense. I'll leave you to read about that. Look up Poor People's Party. Good. Not the new one, the old one from the 60s. So Head Start is out there, and Head Start offers early education to preschoolers primarily. There's Early Head Start and Head Start is preschool. Early Head Start focuses really on parents doing education and some nutritional support. It's really early ed for kids in disadvantaged communities. Why? Well, because privileged kids whose folks have the money, they show up at first grade. They've already done kindergarten and maybe preschool, and they have enrichment toys, watching TV. It's Little Einsteins or Sesame Street or something. And they know their letters and their numbers, and people have been reading to them, so they know that you read from left to right, and it's not a magic trick, and on and on and on and on. And they're socialized already. They know how to interact with other people and kind of negotiate body space and why sharing is important. And they've had adequate nutrition, so their brain is like full of neurons, just ready to be programmed. And if you are poor, and all of that might be not true. So Head Start kind of pulls that level up, so you're level with those other kids starting school. Okay, daycare can help. Daycare is really expensive. Even if it's subsidized, it could be tricky, right? So single mom, maybe you really want to go back to work, but your job pays you less than daycare costs. So you have that, right? You have that tragic decision to make. Do I work for less than money because I have to pay daycare just to like maintain my position in the rat race? That kind of stuff. In Colorado, we just did a daycare subsidy thing to try and make it so everyone gets preschool. If they want preschool, everyone can have preschool here. Daycare can socialize children and provide that basis for first grade, can offer stability and supervision and nutrition that might otherwise be missing, leaving kids with grandma or a great grandma who's not entirely with it and smokes in the house and just watches Fox News all day. That's not great daycare, right? Babies like bouncing in the seat there but not really getting anything. Daycare would be better than that if that's what's happening. Daycare is complicated. Daycare can be good. Daycare can be bad. Daycare could be any of the points in between on that spectrum, right? really the ultimate rule here, the one takeaway from the daycare section is the type of daycare doesn't matter that much. Your mom could be as good as a professional daycare if your mom's really good, engaged and educated and patient and so on. The best family daycare, that's where it's someone's house and they can bring in like X number of children and they play in the backyard and stuff, versus a facility like a Montessori school or something. The best family daycare is going to be better than the worst institutional daycare, and the best institutional daycare is going to be better than the worst family daycare, like that. Get it? The type of daycare we're doing is much less relevant than the quality of the daycare that we're doing. What constitutes quality? Well, a low ratio of children to staff, like no more than 4 children per staff member, and no more than one child under 1 year old per staff member. Clean, sanitary, the education level of the caregiver matters, enrichment, programming, scheduling, safety, all that stuff. Does attachment suffer? Your kid's away from you all the time. How do you do attachment? Kind of assuming you've had the first 9 months to a year to form the attachment doesn't seem to suffer in particular. If you get a couple of hours at the end of each thing, the quality of attachment seems to be fine. And the primary attachment seems to set the context for all the other attachments. So if you start preschool at 3 or 4 or something, and you've been with an attachment figure until then you're going to process the relationship with the teachers and the other kids through that sort of theory of mind that you've built up about the parent, right? The primary attachment is going to be a filter for all the other attachments. So you could survive some like unpleasant attachment situations at the daycare if you have that solid attachment in the home. Okay. In daycare, like a million different challenges arise from this need to make money. You can't just open a daycare and see kids for free, right? And even if you could, if you're Elon Musk or something, you wouldn't, because you want your billions of dollars for yourself. So this portion of the class usually would be spent with people breaking up into groups of 3 or 4, like design a daycare from the ground up, which means you have to read about the different kinds of daycare, and have some aspirations and stuff. There's a list of things you have to account for, though, and make a budget by the end. And that need to make a budget kind of turns everyone into vulture capitalists. It's a little bit fun and a little bit disheartening to watch, but this is real world stuff. People start off going, well, obviously we want the best staff we can get. So we want people with master's degrees. We're going to pay them $26 an hour in healthcare and benefits and college tuition reimbursements. But by the end, when you're trying to figure out, how much do I have to charge each child by the hour? And how do I account for the fact that I have to provide these services equitably, which means maybe a sliding scale, or I just can't charge that much or something. Whereas and look up the Medicare reimbursement, and I can't afford this staff anymore. And then you're in that vulture capitalist position where you're like, well, we'll get people with bachelor's degrees, but pay them, half what they're worth and work them half time and no benefits. No. The need to make money is contrary to the need to do care. So that is it for chapter 4. Thanks for doing this with me, and see you in the next chapter. Over and out.